Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we're taking a look at the Ember Mage. This is a Dragon Knight solo build, just like my Warden, the Adventurer, just like the Templar Lord Knight. This is the Ember Mage. So this build does work really good in Delves, Dolmens, Public Dungeons. I would say a good chunk of the normal dungeons, except for the ones that require two-player dynamics. You have to become comfortable with this build before you try taking on normal dungeons or even vet dungeons solo. You'll see why here in a second. But it does work really good in those, and it can solo DSA on normal to a degree, and it's really, really good at Maelstrom Arena, which is kind of scary because it's a solo build and you wouldn't think it'd be that good, but it's actually really good at Maelstrom Arena on both normal and veteran. Now I have tested this in the past in these different content. I started originally testing this back during Morrowind's release, but it just wasn't in the right place to release. And I know a lot of people are going, how come it wasn't in the right place? Well, that's because of the CP. It didn't have enough CP. So this is an in-game, like for a solo player, this is something you want to be max CP to play. Otherwise, it doesn't, like, you kind of have to finagle it to get it to work really well. And that's just because of the class. You know, honestly, it's the class. It has a lot to do with the class. So let's get right into it. So taking a look at the stats, you can see we have 48 in the Magicka, 16 in the health. That gives us a 33k Magicka with a 25k health. Now I chose the Argonian to kind of show that, hey, you can choose any race and still be this build. And you can be any race and be this build. You can be a Khajiit if you want to. It still works. It's really preference based on the player's choice. 33k Magicka, 25k health, 12k stamina. We want that stamina up there, by the way, for things like dodge rolling, breaking free, even blocking. Good magic recovery is very important for this build, so having that 1222 is really, like, depending on the race you choose, you could have higher magic recovery or less, but it's really up to you. When it comes to the spell damage, you want it around 2k or a little bit higher because of certain things. We'll get to that in a second. This build really needs the high crit too, so try to get as high as crit as possible. 39 is about as high as you're going to get, to be honest, unless you make it in light armor. And if you make it in light armor, you're just not going to have the survivability resistance wise to make it. So just letting you know. The resistances are 23 and 19. That's perfect for this build. I know it seems like you would need more, but it's really perfect for this build, especially for solo play. Going down here, it does use the Lady Mundus Stone for the extra spell and physical resistance. We do run Major Prophecy on both bars. We are running Inner Light on both bars. And we do want to use Witch Mother's Brew for the magic recovery and the max health, max Magicka. Now, the max health, max Magicka, a lot of people complain about Witch Mother's Brew and Dubious Camera Throne because they have lower values than, like, dual stat food. But the thing that it brings with it is that recovery, and that recovery is really needed for this build to work good. Now, there is a new food that was introduced with Clockwork City. It's a more expensive, but if you can get that, it's a dual stat food. Does the same thing as Witch Mother's Brew, except it gives you magic recovery and health recovery. Now, if you can get a little bit more health recovery in this build, but like by playing a Nord or playing an Orc, that might make this build a little better with that food. But it just depends. But you'd have to do some rearrangement of champion points, and right now it just doesn't have enough to make that work. So, but Witch Mother's Brew or that other one will work fine. This is the better one. Alright, so let's go take a look at the gear. So the gear is very similar to like what I run on my other solo builds. It's mainly a DPS build in a survivable way. We'll put it that way. So we are running a two-piece Grothar. The Grothar's for the Magicka, and then the two-piece bonus. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create a swirling lava pools around you that deal X amount of damage to all enemies within 8 meters every 1 second for 5 seconds. It can be recasted in 10 seconds. So it has 5 seconds of activation, you have 5 seconds of downtime, and then another 10 seconds, you know, like total. So it's kind of cool because you can keep this up non-stop because of all the damage you got going on. We are running infused on the helm, and the shoulder is reinforced heavy. So the helm is medium, reinforced heavy shoulders. When it comes to the body, you want to wear a 5-piece Julianus in heavy, and you want the chest, the legs in infused, the gauntlets heavy, and the chest and legs are heavy, of course, but the gauntlets are heavy, but Nirnhoned. You do not want reinforced. But you can get by with reinforced for a while until you can get Nirnhoned gauntlets, and then you want a Nirnhoned belt. This is going to give you the greater resistance values that you need. Moving on down here, we are running reinforced boots as well. This is going to give you, like I said, greater resistance values. Now, you're not going to be an uber tank, okay? But you are going to be tanky, which makes it really good for solo play. This build also does work in Cyrodiil. If you want to play it in Cyrodiil, you will have a 30k health, so you can change out the jewelry set if you want to, say, willpower, just as long as you have like a 20k health to take you to that 25k while you're in Cyrodiil. That's what you can do. So still really good setup here. Next up, we are running 3 pieces of willpower instead of endurance. Now the 3 pieces of willpower are spell power, do have spell damage on them, but like I said, you can adjust this. You can make these magicka if you're going into Cyrodiil, like just put magicka and chance on them instead of health, or you can just leave the build the way it is and it still works really good. You're really tanky, you have a lot of health, you have a really good spell, you know, max magicka to a degree, you have a lot of good damage, you have the right amount of critical for Cyrodiil, which is great, and then your survivability is a little bit better than most people. You're just not using in-pin, and really you can just adjust your champion points to give you some in-pin if you want. Alright, so with the stuff down here on the back of the armor, you want a light helm, or light belt, medium helm. You can go with medium gauntlets, but honestly you're not going to get the same resistance value, because the medium helm just gives you just a little bit more than, like, gives you about the same as what a heavy helm will. Heavy helm will give you more resistances, but when you change it out for the medium gauntlets have less resistances than the heavy gauntlets, and it comes out to about the same resistances. So run a medium helm, light belt with this, and then make sure your shoulders and boots are reinforced, not Nirnhoned. So these 2 Nirnhoned, these 2 reinforced. And then do 4 health in the smaller pieces, and then tri-stats in the big pieces. Now on the jewelry, do 2 spell damage and 1 magic recovery. Magic recovery is really super important for this build because you use a lot of magicka, so you need that magicka coming in constantly from the heavy attacks you're going to be doing. On to the staff, we are running a master staff. The master staff with a crusher enchant, and the reason we're running a master staff is look what it does. Reduces the cost of destructive touch by 30% and increases the direct damage it deals by 20%. So that reduced cost of 30% saves you magicka, and this thing is expensive, the destructive touch is, if you don't have this staff. So, and you really want this ability. Next up, we are running a Maelstrom staff with a weapon damage enchant on it. This gives you increased weapon damage, and since it's infused, it gives you a lot more weapon damage, and it will be up constantly almost. So you want to keep this applied as much as possible for that extra weapon damage. Now the cool thing is that it gives you that benefit of the crushing wall set. So your light and heavy attacks deal additional damage to enemies in the wall elements, and it doesn't matter what bar you're on. You as soon as you cast your wall of elements, you automatically get crushing wall applied to you for the duration of your wall of elements. So even if you're on the front bar, your light and heavy attacks still hit for greater amounts. The same thing goes with this. Like if you're on the back bar and you know your destructive touch is back there, it won't apply. But if you're on the front bar, destructive touch works. This one is different. It works on both bars with this up. That's kind of weird. So moving on to the skills now. Make sure you just get all the class passives, guys. Even if you're not using abilities, just get the class passive. When it comes to weapon passives, get the destruction staff passives, because that's the only weapon you're going to basically be using. Through the armor passives, get the top 3 light armor passives, the top 2 medium and bottom medium, and then for heavy armor, get all these passives. I'm going to skip the world skills. You can be a vampire with this. It's up to you, but honestly, you really don't need it. Moving down the line, Fighters Guild. I get intimidating presence always because of questing. I do a lot of questing with my solo builds. And then Banish the Wicked for ultimate generation. Mage's Guild, just fill it all in because you are using Mage Guild abilities on both bars with this build. Undaunted, make sure you fill in both these Undaunted passives. And if you want to tank with this build in normal dungeons with a group, or you want to run like vet dungeons with a group and they don't mind you running this build, you can run Inner Rage as your taunt, and you can be a tank. Vet dungeons are going to be a little bit more difficult than normal dungeons, I'm not going to lie, because of the lower health, but once you become accustomed to the build, your lower health isn't going to matter much. Moving on to the Alliance, if you are tanking, I would suggest getting Warhorn, and especially aggressive Warhorn. For when you're doing those more difficult dungeons, and put it on the back bar, do not put it on the front bar. You can get some of the support skills if you want, like Purge, that kind of thing, but you're not really going to be playing in anything that difficult in a group, so no reason to have it. Moving on to the racial passes, make sure you fill in all racial passes no matter what race you're playing, and then when it comes to the crafting, get the medicinal use and provisionings, Gourmand and Connoisseur. Gourmand and Connoisseur you really don't need because you are using a 2-hour food, so it's not necessary. It helps, but it's really not necessary. If you were running a 1-hour food, I would suggest getting this because it will help. But when you're running a 2-hour food, you don't really get it. I just fill it in out of habit. So going over the skills on the main bar, we are running Burning Embers. Now, Burning Embers is a great dot, and it's also going to be your main source of healing almost. So you want to keep this up as much as possible. And if you have to use it a couple times to get the heal off, do it. Because the total damage inflicted when the effect ends. So if you use this and then wait a few seconds and use it again, you'll get 86% of the damage total back in healing. And you can maintain your healing with this one ability, almost. Next up we have Destructive Touch, changed into Flame Clench. This is an amazing ability. Look how much damage this thing does. 7,435 flame damage and an additional 6,205 damage over 8 seconds. That's 6,205. It doesn't seem like much over 8 seconds, but if you divide it by 8 seconds, it's just under an 800 damage per second, and you can really kind of stretch it out too, or get it built up because it will crit. So next up we are using Elemental Drain for Major Breach and for the Magic Return, because we are a solo build. We can't rely on others. Solo builds do not rely on others. They rely on themselves. So you need self-reliance, and this is a self-reliant skill for you because it does apply that Magicka steal, which gives you Magicka back. Now, because we are a DK and we have no extra magic recovery from the class itself, like a lot of other classes have ways of giving you magic recovery, stamina recovery, that kind of thing. This doesn't. The DK doesn't. So you really need this one ability to make that magic recovery just a little bit better. Moving on, Fragmented Shield, really great damage shield for you when you're solo playing, because it explodes and it does damage, and that really applies to your total damage dealt. So when the shield is applied, it's about an 8k shield, but when it gets removed, it's gonna explode and deal 5k damage pretty much. So next up we have Inner Light. This is for the Max Magicka. It increases your Max Magicka by 5%, but since you are running 2 Mage Guild abilities on both bars, make sure you get Magicka Controller, and this will increase the Max Magicka you get by 2% for each Mage Guild slotted. So we actually have a 9% increase in Max Magicka because of this and the next ability, which is Shooting Star, which does flame damage. Now, being a DK, flame damage is super important, and Shooting Star is really good for you because you generate 12 ultimate for each enemy hit by this ability. So if you're in a dungeon soloing and you drop this on a group of like 5 enemies, you're going to get, you know, 58 or almost 60 ultimate right back. So it's not going to take you as long to build ultimate. On to the back bar. This is really important that you guys pay close attention to this. If you are tanking with this build, there is only one ability you will remove from the back bar, and that is Inner Light. And you're going to put your taunt here. Everything else has to stay. And then you can put Warhorn on Standard of Might if you're taking vet dungeons. In normal dungeons, keep Banner here. So, first off, we have Engulfing Flames. This is a great AoE, like cone. And it also, any enemies standing or affected enemies take 10% more damage from all fire damage attacks. So all your fire damage is going to be boosted by 10%. So you're going to want to keep this up all the time. Now, it does last 10 seconds. It does a good amount of upfront damage, and then it does decent damage over time. Now, because we do have a greater Magicka pool, that we can, you know, get greater damage out of this. But if you notice, we have our next ability, which is Unstable Wall. Now, Unstable Wall is a little different from the other Wall of Elements. The other Wall of Elements, the other morph, lasts for 2 seconds longer and gives you 2 more ticks of damage. That's really it. This one, on the other hand, has a chance of, well, will explode when the wall ends, and that exploding wall can do critical damage. So it actually can produce more damage in the long run, but only by a marginal difference. So I like Unstable Wall. It's just a preference of mine with this build. Next up, we have Degeneration. Degeneration's a really cool ability from the Mage Guild. One, it does damage. It does a big chunk of damage. You can 7,504. On top of that, it lasts for 14.4 seconds. So it does damage over that 14.4 seconds. It does the 7,504. But it also heals you for 1,808 health, and an additional 1,808 health every 6 seconds. Now, while it's active for the 14.4 seconds, your light and heavy attacks against an enemy have a 15% chance to heal you for 132% of the damage caused. This is essential to this build. You need that healing, because the only other heal you have is on the front bar. But when you apply this to the enemy, they retain that that thing, you know, the negative effect. Now, this also grants you Major Sorcery, which increases your spell damage by 20%, which is really important. Next up, we have Hardened Armor. This gives you Major Ward, Major Resolve, increasing both spell and physical resistance, and it gives you a small damage shield. But the next part is a really important one. While active, your armor returns 1,407 magic damage to melee characters. So anyone hitting you physically is going to take 1,407 damage whenever they hit you physically. So this is a really good skill to have. Next up, we have Inner Light. The other reason why we have Inner Light here also is Major Proficiency to increase our spell critical, by the way. So you want it on both bars, but you also want it there for the max Magicka. You can drop this off if you're using the taunt, because you're not on the back bar very much, so you can drop this off if you're tanking. And only if you're tanking in normal and vet dungeons, guys. Do not try to tank trials with this build, because 1, a lot of the in-game players won't like it, and 2, it can do it. It can tank some trials really good, but it's not that, it's not something you want to do, okay? Trust me. Not unless you're really good at it and your group doesn't mind. Next up, we do have Standard of Might. Really good ability. Does flame damage every second for 17 seconds. It applies Major Defile, reducing healing received. And then standing in the area of increases your damage done by 15% and also reduces the damage you take by 15%. This is why this is really good to use in normal dungeons and not vet dungeons, is because of that increased damage. decrease damage. But when you're in with a group in a vet dungeon, it's not about just what you can do, it's about how you can benefit your group. So Warhorn's a little better, and Veteran. Just saying. Moving down though, you can see an ally can synergize off of this also. So it's a really good synergy. But yeah, that's pretty much the skills. Now let's go over the champion points. Champion points are very similar to my other builds, guys. So we're just going to start right here. 37 in Ironclad, reducing the damage taken against direct damage by 15%. Moving on over here, Thick Skin, also 37 with 15% reduced damage from damage over time. We have 43 in a Hardy, 43 in Elemental Expert, or Elemental Defender, sorry. Both of these giving you 10% damage reduction pretty much to any kind of damage. So you really want to have 43 into both of these. Having this here gives you 15% from damage over time. So if any of that damage over time is poison, disease, physical, like a bleed, that's actually 25% damage reduction. Same thing goes with this. Now when you put down your banner, it will give you another 25 or 15% on top of that 25. So you get 30 or 40% damage mitigation when you have banner down. So it's a really good thing to have that banner and to have these at this value again. Moving on over here, we have 16 in Expert Defender. This reduces damage taken from light and heavy attacks. Now I hear this all the time. People say, well, most enemies do direct damage. They do, but it's mainly through light and heavy attacks. Otherwise, a lot of their abilities are going to be, they will be direct damage, but they also do a lot more light and heavy attacks than they do direct damage. So, just pointing that out. So having this here really can help. Now, you can take the points out of here if you want. You want to put it into the direct damage thing, go ahead. That's up to you. How you place your CP is really up to you. I just place it my way, and this is what I prefer. So this reduces light and heavy attack damage by 10%. Now, 56 in the Bastion increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 20%. Damage shields are super important when solo playing or even tanking because of you need to mitigate damage. So having something greater to mitigate damage with is really important. That's why we have the 56 in here. Moving on, 8 into Quick Recovery, reducing or increasing the healing received by 2.35%, but it's actually only 2%. So this stacks with your heavy armor and passive that increases your healing received again by that much. Now you can take out of here and put it into heavy armor focus if you want to get just a little bit more physical resistance. It's up to you. Moving on. We have 23 into Warlord, reducing break free cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing bashing costs by 10%. Because you are solo playing, you do bash a lot and you do block a lot. So having these greater reduced costs really can help you out. Into the middle tree, we have 75 into Arcanist. This increases magic recovery by 14%. Remember earlier I said DKs have nothing that gives them magic recovery? This does. And with the other 4% you get from wearing the one piece of light armor, that's an 18% magic recovery, and that's the best you're gonna get unless you're a vampire, and then you can go up to 28%. So moving on to Tenacity, you can put into here the 43 points. I suggest 43 for the 10% because you are wearing 5 pieces of heavy. You get 25% of your magic return on heavy attacks. With this, you get another 10%. And then you get a baseline of 30. So all together, you get 65% return. Now, if you guys don't know how return works, I'm going to go over it really quick. So basically, that 65% is 65% of this value. So without a potion going, it's 1222. With a potion going, it's 1422. So 1422 plus 65%. So it's like 65% of the 1442 added to it. Now, every 2 seconds you get magic recovery. So when you do a heavy attack, so when I do a heavy attack, takes 2 seconds. So by the time that heavy attack ends, I will get 1422. On top of that, I get another 1422 and that percentage, 65% added to it. So I can get like 4K back with a heavy attack. And that's how recovery works. So it's good to put into recovery, and it's good to put into tenacity, especially for this build. Moving over here, we have 56 in the Shadow Ward, reducing our block cost by 20%. 20% to some people is nothing. But in this case, it's really, really good because you are solo playing. Like, they'll tell you 56 in here is bad, but when you're solo playing, you need that extra block cost to save you resources. Because you do block, like I said. And since you're using a staff, having that block cost there is really good. Next up, 23 into Tumbling. This reduces dodge roll cost by 10. And then 4 into Befoul. You get 4 points left over, you can put it wherever. Moving on to the blue tree. 43 into Bless. This increases healing done by 10%. We are an Argonian, so we get 5% more healing done. So we get 15% healing done and 5% healing received. We are a Dragon Knight. And we have a passive that gives us 12% healing received. Plus we have a passive from wearing 5 pieces of heavy armor, which gives us 8% healing received, which is 20%. And then on top of that, we get another 5% healing received from being Argonian. And actually, this build has 27% healing received. So your heals hit for a lot on you. Next up, we have 23 into Elfborn, increasing your damage done on critical damage and critical healing done by 10%. We have 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. This is how Flame Clench, by the way, gets to that 7k mark. It does get 2,000 damage added to it, and I'll be showing you guys that before I go into it. I'm going to show you guys how Flame Clench works with this setup. So next up, we have 35 into Staff Expert. This increases your light and heavy attack damage by 20% with a Destruction Staff or Resto Staff. 56 in a Master at Arms, increasing your damage with direct damage done by 20%. Now, somebody is going to mention this, but in my other builds, I have 19 into... I have 51 points in here, and 51 points in a Thaumaturge. Now, I have 23 in this one for 10%. Now, the reason I have this one set up differently is because I have 43 in a Blessed. This build needs this. So, without having that 43, I could take this 17 points and put it in here, or put it in here. It's up to you, and I'll show you what will happen if you do that. So if you put 17 in here, it goes up to 16, and the same thing goes over here. It'll go up to 16%. It's really up to you on what you want to do. You can even take those 17 points and put them all into here if you want to increase your spell penetration. It's really up to you. I just put it here because of habit. So either way, it still works. Alright, so that's it for the champion points. Now I'm going to show you guys a little bit of this build in action on a world boss. Now remember, world bosses only have a 9,100 spell penetration, so this guy's going to take a lot more damage than in a normal dungeon. In a normal dungeon, the resistance value is 14,380, and then in Vet, it's 18,200. So in open world, you're going to have an easier time killing things than you are in normal dungeons and in Vet dungeons. So just letting you know that up front. So to start off, you kind of want to get this, and you want to get this applied first. Now I'm going to focus on him first before I take out the plant because of the way this works. So I'm going to do that real quick. Like I said, I'm going to apply both of those, and then I'm going to hit him with Degeneration. I'm on to kind of try and keep them both together. And now watch what happens when I use my Ember stuff, my claws. I can just sit here and just do this all day long. I'm going to go ahead and get between these two, and I'm going to go ahead and pop my buffs again. This build is really sufficient, really, honestly, guys. It's really crazy. The healing from it is absurd. And one's down. Last one's left. And voila, both bosses are down. And that is the build. So that's the Ember Mage and how it works and everything. As you guys can see, like once you get used to playing it and you're staying on that front bar to keep that burning talons up, or the ember, this up, burning embers, it can just basically keep you healed all the time because of that extra healing you get. Now, Flame Clinch, because a lot of people are going to say, why are you using Flame Clinch over the other one? Now, because I'm using the Master Staff, which if you don't have a Master Staff or a Maelstrom Staff, just use crafted staffs. Play through DSA with a group. You can play this build in DSA even as a DPS if you wanted to. Play through it in as a group. Get to the end. Get your try and get a Master Staff, and then you can take the Master Staff, put it on the front bar, and run Maelstrom, and it'll give you better advantage in Maelstrom because of the benefit. One, it does have a knockback, which is really great for controlling adds in Maelstrom Arena, but it also does damage, massive amounts of damage, because of the way the Master Staff works. So the Master Staff reduces the cost of Destructive Touch by 30% and increases its direct damage dealt by 2,000. Now, you guys are probably wondering what that means. So look at Destructive Touch here. It does 3,388 damage. And it says here, Flame Clinch knocks back the enemy and deals additional damage over time. So the damage over time is increased for using Flame Clinch. But that 2,000 damage on the staff gets applied to that 3,388. So that's why it looks like it does 7,435. But it's also because of your champion points. If you look here, this increases Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. Now I'm going to show you guys what happens when I take this out. And we're going to go take a look at that Flame Clinch now. Now it's down to 6,896. But you still see how it does a little bit more damage than what this does. Now, I'm not 100% on this, but I'm pretty positive this does have an effect on it as well. So you want to keep those ones up there for that purpose, to make Flame Clinch work. So I just wanted to show you guys why it's important to use a Master Staff with this build. One, you get Flame Clinch, which does a lot of damage up front, and it does an additional damage over time. Now, if you're playing this build as a DPS and you have almost 40k Magicka, you have a lot greater spell damage than this build does, you can actually push this ability up to like 9k, 10k on the damage dealt up front. And your damage over time is going to be about 8 to 9k. So you're going to do 1,000 damage per tick, and if it's critting, that's even more. It's a really powerful ability on this build. Now, if you're going to do it with lightning, lightning is really good too, because its Shock Clinch stuns the enemy and deals damage to other nearby enemies. It's really actually quite good. Frost Clinch is really good as well, but only works if you're playing a Warden. So each staff actually has its applicated class it works best with. Flame Clinch works best on a DK, Frost Clinch works best on a Warden, Shock Clinch works best on a Sork. But it's really up to you on how you want to play your build. I love using this ability. I think it's a really great ability, especially on this build, because of the extra damage. Now, how you choose to play this build is up to you. I just prefer this setup. Now, on live, I have played this build because I used to play a Dark Elf DK, or I still play a Dark Elf DK. He goes through iterational changes, and now he's set up as the Dragon Guard build that I have on PTS. or I showed off on from PTS. I actually played that on live with my DK Dark Elf, and it works out really good. It's really powerful. But this one, I played him originally like this as a Stark Elf. So now think about that. He had 7% more fire damage. I didn't have the same benefits that the Argonian did, but I had close to it, and it was really just a cool setup. So, but that's it for the Ember Mage, guys. I hope you guys liked it. If you guys did, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, or possibly want to see more videos by me, you can hit the subscribe button. I do have 2 other solo builds coming out this week. I have coming out next the Sork, which is also a Magicka solo build, and then I have the Nightblade, which is a little bit different stamina solo build. So keep your eyes open for those. Those will be coming out later in the week. So thanks for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.